Welcome back. Today we're talking about solving quadratics. Today we're using factoring. So let's go ahead and take a look at some important information. So this is important information to remember when solving a quadratic. To solve a quadratic equation, you're going to find the value of x. Equations can have no solutions, one solution, or two solutions, and solutions can also be called roots of the equation. Now let's take a look at the steps we're going to follow. So here are our steps for solving. First, we're going to check to make sure that the equation is equal to 0. Then we're going to remove any common factors. Then we'll factor the new trinomial that we make. Then we'll set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. So now let's go ahead and try that with example A. All right, here we are at example A, and it says find the solution to the equation 3x squared minus 16x minus 12. So first, we've got to check to make sure that it's equal to 0, which it is. Then we've got to see if we have any common factors between 3, 16, and 12, which we do not. So we're going to go ahead and use our factor puzzle. So I'm going to draw my factor puzzle up here. We're going to multiply a times c, so 3 times negative 12 is going to give us negative 36, and we're going to do negative 16 as our b. So then we're going to look for things that multiply to negative 36, add to negative 16. 1 and 36, no, that's not going to work. 2 and 18 though will. All right, so I'm going to look for a negative 18 here, and then probably a positive 2, so that when I add positive 2 and negative 18 together, they're going to give me negative 16. All right, so now we're going to write that out. So we've got 3x squared plus 2x minus 18x minus 12. All right, so now we're going to look for our binomials here. So we got one binomial here, one binomial here. All right, and see what we can pull out. All right, so in the first one, looks like we could pull out just an x. So 3x divided by x, 3x squared divided by x is going to give us 3x. 2x divided by x is going to give us just x. On the other side, it looks like we're going to pull out a negative 6 in this case. So negative 18 divided by negative 6 is going to give us 3x. Negative 12 divided by negative 6, positive 2. All right, so now that we've got that, we can go ahead and set our terms. So if we're going to pull things out of our things, we've got x minus 6 as one of our terms, or one of our factors. And on the other side, we've got 3x plus 2. So those are our two factors, but we're not done because we're looking for our solution. So we need to set those factors equal to 0. So one of our factors is x equals minus 6, and we're going to set that equal to 0 and solve our equation. So we're going to draw our wall, add 6 to both sides. Negative 6 and positive 6 are going to cancel, leaving us with x equals 6. So one of our roots is 6. So now we're going to solve the other side. So we've got 3x there. So 3x plus 2 is going to be equal to 0. And again, we're going to draw our wall and solve. So we're going to subtract 2 on both sides. These are going to cancel, leaving me with 3x equals negative 2. And then the last step of our equation is to divide both sides by 3. These are going to cancel, leaving me with x equals negative 2/3. All right, so our two roots are 6 and negative 2/3. We're going to write those as an ordered pair in least to greatest form. So negative 2/3 is smaller than positive 6, and those are the roots of our equation. Now let's take a look at the next example. All right, here we are at example B, and we've got 2x squared plus 14x plus 26 equals 2. So we've got some work to do here the first. We need to make sure that it's equal to 0, and it's not. It's equal to 2. So we need to make sure that we move that 2 to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 2 on this side, subtract 2 on this side. Notice that I can only subtract the 2 from the constant because the 2 is a constant. So these are going to cancel, leaving me with 0, and then I've got 26 minus 2, which is 24. And then everything else is going to stay the same. 14x is going to stay the same. 2x squared is going to stay the same. So now I have to check part 2. Do I have any common factors? And in this case, I do. 2, 14, and 24 are all divisible by 2. So I can divide both sides by 2. So I'm going to divide this side by 2 and this side by 2, because I have to do whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other. When I do that, 2x squared divided by 2 is going to leave me with just x squared. 14x divided by 2 is going to leave me with 7x. 24 divided by 2 is going to leave me with 12, and then 0 divided by 2 is 0. All right, so now I've got a polynomial. I've got it set equal to 0. So now I can actually begin my next step, which is, again, create a factor puzzle. So in this case, I'm going to do 1 times 12. So create my factor puzzle over here. So I've got 12, and they're going to be adding to 7. So what does multiply to 12 and add to 7? That's going to be 3 and 4. All right, so now I'm going to write that out in my expanded form. Very important that I always write this out in expanded form. And when I'm writing out an expanded form, I got to remember that I got to use the equation that I actually came up with at the end, not my original. So I'm going to make sure that I've got my x squared here, plus 3x, plus 4x, plus 12. Because again, those are the equation that I came up with at the end, the thing that I actually factored. So now I'm going to go ahead and create some binomials. So I've got a binomial here and a binomial here. Let's see what we can pull out of those. So the first one, it looks like I could pull out just an x. So I've got x on the outside and then x plus 3 on the inside. So the second side, it looks like I could pull out a 4. So pull out the 4 and end up with x plus 3 on the inside. So then I got my two binomials here at the end. I've got x plus 4 as one of my binomials, and x plus 3 is my other binomials. And that's great, but I'm not done because I'm going to try and find my roots to this equation. So I'm going to have x plus 4. X plus 4 is equal to 0. Subtract 4 on both sides. These are going to cancel. I'm going to be left with x equals 4 as one of my roots. On the other one, I've got x plus 3 equals 0. Draw my wall, subtract 3 on both sides, and I get x is equal to negative 3 on this side. So I've got my roots of negative 4 and negative 3. And again, I'm going to write them in order pair, and I'm going to write them as a least to greatest. So I've got negative 4 is going to be coming first, negative 3 is going to go second, and those are the roots to my equation. Now let's take a look at the next example. Okay, here we are at example C, and it says find the solution to the equation 2x squared minus 12x equals 0. Oh, this is interesting. Our quadratic doesn't have a c. Okay, well, we know it's equal to 0, and that's our first step, so we've got that out of the way. Now we need to see if there's any common factor that we can pull out. And in this case, we can. We can pull out both a 2 and an x. So we can take out a 2 and an x, but if I pull a 2 and an x there, so pulling that out of x squared is going to leave me with just x. And then taking that x out of the negative 12 is going to give me no x, and then negative 12 divided by 2 is just going to give me negative 6. All right, so then I've got that equal to 0. All right, well, good news. Now I have two terms already. So one of my terms is going to be 2x, so I'm going to set that equal to 0. So 2x equal to 0. And my other one is x minus 6 is going to be equal to 0. So notice I didn't have to make a factor puzzle here because I didn't have a c value that I needed to work through. Right, I only had two things. I pulled out the greatest common factor, had my two factors, and now I can solve. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my wall on this side, divide both sides by 2. That's going to leave me with x equals 0. All right, so one of my factors is 0. On the other side, I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So these are going to cancel, leave me with x equals 6. And there we go. There's my two factors there. So again, I'm going to write those as an ordered pair. So I've got 0 and 6 because I'm going to write them in order from least to greatest. And I'm done with that one. Let's move on to the next one. All right, here's where things really get interesting. So it says find the solution to the equation 3x squared minus 6 equals 0. So in the last equation, I didn't have a c. In this equation, I don't have a b. I only have one x, and they've written us an important note down there. It says, notice we only have one x, so we can isolate instead of factor. So that means we're going to just solve this equation like we've learned how to solve equations before. So I'm going to draw my wall. I'm going to add 6 to both sides because those are the constants. They're going to cancel, leave me with 3x squared equal to positive 6. All right, now my next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by 3. These are going to cancel, leave me with just x squared equals 2. So then I need to do my last step, and I need to get rid of that x squared, so I need to do the opposite of that. The opposite of x squared is going to be the square root. So I've got square root here, square root here. These are going to cancel, leave me with x is equal to the square root of 2. But this is a parabola, so we know that there may be more than one solution. We have to check, right? We got x is equal to square root of 2. If I were to multiply the square root of 2 times square root of 2, that would give me a positive answer. However, if I also multiplied the negative of the square root of 2 times the negative square root of 2, that would also give me the same answer. So in this case, we have two roots, and we're going to have to write them as such. So we've got x is going to be equal to the positive square root of 2, and x is also going to be equal to the negative square root of 2. So if I'm writing them in an ordered pair, I'm going to say negative the square root of 2 and positive the square root of 2 are my roots to this equation. Now that brings us to the end of this problem. It also brings us to the end of this set of notes. If you like this video, go ahead and say thumbs up. If you love this video, go ahead and say sub, and we will catch you in the next one.